Everybody. So today I get to talk to you about a topic that I really did enjoy researching, and I kind of had an interest. I used to be a psych major, so this topic kind of came easy to me as an area I was passionate about, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as well. So I get to talk to you all about memory formation in humans. I can't really say how squirrels make memories, but I did do research over how people make memories, so that's what we'll be talking about today. So before the 1890s, 1880s, learning and memory was kind of reserved for the higher class. It wasn't really disseminated down to the lower peoples of the world, Europe, Asia, all these other places. And this mainly because we didn't have much research on how memory and learning and teaching worked. So it was kind of reserved for private tutors, think your Aristotles, your Socrates, this, that, and the others. So before that time, it was kind of reserved for high class, high society. That was until a German by the name Hermann Ebbinghaus published Memory in 1890 to the University of Berlin, and what his findings concluded was, well, first of all, his research consisted of him reading a passage, and he'd write down as best he could from memory this passage. And as you can imagine, initially there were a lot of errors that he made. He couldn't recite things perfectly, but then as he did it more often, the number of errors that he made dropped to almost zero. He almost got it perfect the last few times that he did it. And this is referred to as the Ebbinghaus learning curve. And although it might seem obvious to us today that repetition increases memory and recall, at the time this was pretty groundbreaking. We didn't really have a whole lot of research in the neuroscience of memory, and it kind of fathered the whole field as we know it today. So we're going to start by defining memory, kind of what that means before we can talk about how memories are formed. So in 1968, Atkinson, in a paper called Memory, a Controlled System, describes memory as the interface between the environment and the organism, in this case people. So it's your genetics interacting with the environment and storing information that it absorbs from the environment. So the information's out there, the world is made of information, who or what is trying to eat you, who or what can you eat, and that's useful information, so we try to store that, and that helps us navigate the world. So it's a storage of useful information to help you survive, essentially, is what memory is what we refer to as today. So in the University of Queensland article, Memory Formation, it kind of laid it out in an easy process, how memories are formed. So you start by detecting a signal in your environment, a stimulus, a sound, a sight, a smell, something of that sort. And that is then translated by your body system, so your inner ear, your eye, your olfactory sensory in your nose, in your brain. That translate the stimulus into an electrical, chemical kind of current that your brain can interpret and derive meaning out of. So repeated exposure to this stimulus, you smell something often, you read something often, you read the same article 10 times a day, is going to lead to memory of that article better than if you just glance at it one time passing. So repeated exposure to these stimuli creates memory in your brain. So Donald Hebb, in the Organization of Behavior, said that, or concluded that, adjacent neurons in our brain, when one fires, the others around it fire as well. And this kind of led us to believe that you're not building new brain cells with every memory. Instead, your entire brain acts as the infrastructure for which memories are made. So if I take the highway to get to my house, but you take the highway to get to a gas station or a subway, then we're not building new roads for each destination. We're using one road to go to many different places. And that's kind of the infrastructure side of things. So in 2000, Eric Kandel won a Nobel Prize for the biochemistry of how this process works. His findings in 1968 concluded that neurons kind of change their synapses, their ends. It's like a tree branch. They grow new branches to accommodate new information. That's kind of like having a bookshelf, and you're adding new shelves to the already existing bookshelf to hold more books. You're holding more information in that regard. So now that we kind of have an idea of how memories are formed, you have to talk about the types and when they're stored, and where and when. So in researching this, I discovered there's 10 to 20 types of memory, depending on who you ask. It's a very researched field. It's very specific in that regard. But I'll stick to the main three just to keep it kind of succinct and clear for everybody here. So bear with me. In the neuroanatomical, neurophysiological, and psychological basis of memory, current models and their origins by Kamina and Guel, it's kind of a mouthful. They determined that memory location is dependent on a number of factors, such as the intensity of the experience. So, for example, a traumatic experience is going to be housed much more permanently in the brain. The type of memory, so if it was a smell, that's in a different location of the brain as well. so on and so forth. So they determine that the location is dependent on frequency, intensity, exposure, that kind of thing. So you have your working memory, which if I say the numbers 8654321, maybe you kind of remember what I just said. I kind of already forgot what the number order was, but that's your working memory. So that's going to allow you to interact with the world briefly, quickly, and allow you to avoid threats. And that's just detection. That's just survival, basically. That's going to be housed in your prefrontal cortex, along with short-term memory. So if you've been studying for an exam, or if you've been practicing your speech, maybe it's floating around in the front of your brain as well. But usually after you perform your exam or you give your speech, that information kind of goes away and you kind of forget it. There's not a whole lot of need for it. That's your short-term memory. Long-term memory, that's going to be in your amygdala, the side of your brain over here. That's going to be much more permanent. So your name, the first breed of your dog, your mom or your dad's face, those kind of things are going to be housed there, and that can last for weeks or up to a lifetime, just depending on on how often you interact with that information. So I use my name on a daily basis. That's going to be there forever, I hope. So those are the types of memories, and that's kind of where they're housed. Of course, there's, like I said, 19 other types of memories I could have gone over and where those are specifically in your brain, but those are the main three that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So in conclusion, you have memory, which is the storage and encoding of information, your ability to recall it. You have how that's formed is you detect signals from your environment, and then that's stored either in your long-term, short-term, or your working memory. And yeah, that about does it for memory. Thank you.